Discerning Hearts provides content dedicated to those on the spiritual journey. To continue production of these videos, prayers, and more, go to discerninghearts.com and click the donate link found there or inside the free Discerning Hearts app to make your donation. Thanks, and God bless.
DiscerningHearts.com, in cooperation with the missionary Benedictines of Christ the King Priory, presents The Holy Rule of St. Benedict, a spiritual path for today's world, with Father Mauritius Wilde. Father Mauritius did his philosophical, theological, and doctoral studies in Rome. Father Mauritius also serves as the prior of Sant Anselmo's in Rome. The Holy Rule of St. Benedict, a spiritual path for today's world, with Father Mauritius Wilde. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. Welcome, Father Mauritius.
Thank you for having me.
I'm real excited about this particular topic on the Holy Rule because it has always, for me, this was the original beacon for the Benedictine charism, and it really spoke to my heart. It's in place of circling around oneself, hospitality, hospice, that healing love. It's so Benedictine.
That is right. Hospitality is really one of our core values. And wherever you go around the world and visit a Benedictine monastery, I think there's not a single one that doesn't have a guest house or a retreat house. Here in Schuyler at Christ the King Priory, we run St. Benedict Center. So this value of hospitality even materializes in visible guest work with guests and ministry to the guests. Maybe I read out to you the chapter that speaks about hospitality and the rule of St. Benedict. It is chapter 53. The reception of guests. All guests who present themselves are to be welcomed as Christ, for he himself will say, I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Proper honor must be shown to all, especially to those who share our faith, and to pilgrims. Once a guest has been announced, the superior and the brothers are to meet him with all the courtesy of love. First of all, they are to pray together and thus be united in peace. But prayer must always precede the kiss of peace because of the delusions of the devil. All humility should be shown in addressing a guest on arrival or departure, by a bow of the head or by a complete prostration of the body. Christ is to be adored because he is indeed welcomed in them. After the guests have been received, they should be invited to pray. Then the superior or an appointed brother will sit with them. The divine law is read to the guest for his instruction, and after that every kindness is shown to him. The superior may break his fast for the sake of guest, unless it is a day of special fast, which cannot be broken. The brothers, however, observe the usual fast. The abbot shall pour water on the hands of the guests, and the abbot with the entire community shall wash their feet. After the washing, they will recite this verse, God, we have received your mercy in the midst of your temple. Great care and concern are to be shown in receiving poor people and pilgrims, because in them more particularly Christ is received. Our very awe of the rich guarantees them special respect. This is the chapter on hospitality. You can see how dear St. Benedict this value is. And he starts with this very strong word that all guests should be welcomed as Christ himself. One may wonder, why does he use this strong image? No, it is not an image, he says. He says, it is Christ who is coming. maybe it is good to know that at his times, and sometimes maybe even today, a visitor was not always a friend. So people who were coming to your house, to your property, could be potential enemies as well. You didn't know. Would they come to rob you, to attack you, to kill you? But here St. Benedict is very clear. He says, welcome them like Christ. So there is a principal openness to whoever comes, which mirrors God's openness towards all people under the sun. So first of all, welcome them. Don't be afraid. Welcome them. Open yourself. It might be Christ who is coming. There's another aspect to this hospitality, considering former times, the times when the rule of St. Benedict was written. You know, at that time, there was not so much entertainment going on, and I guess life could be sometimes boring as well. You know, you had the work, you had the prayer, you had the work. Nowadays, with the internet and the television, you can be distracted at all times, and there always is something going on and something new coming up. But at Benedict times, to have a change in the daily routine was really something. Also in this sense, I assume, guests were seen like Christ is coming. Because what did it mean to welcome a guest? It meant, oh, there is somebody with whom I can share, with whom I can exchange experiences, exchange information. Actually, a guest in earlier times, a visitor, meant somebody who brings information, news, who brings business, or who brings goods. So to be open for guests and visitors meant to be open for life. Visitors and guests were life-giving. And here again we have the parallel to Christ who brought us the life. And we should think about the fact that monasteries mostly were located in low-populated areas, in the deserts, on mountains. So guests were really important people who brought new life, new ideas, new aspects to the monastery. I remember when I was the first time in my life in Africa and visited our monasteries in Tanzania. A few of them are really located in the middle of nowhere, in the bush. And I will never forget the word welcome in Swahili that I heard so often. Karibu. Karibu. This word, I can't count how often I heard this word when I, as a European, came to Africa. Karibu, karibu. It was a huge welcome. That was my deepest impression when I visited this continent, that I was welcomed. And I could feel this openness. And partly you could explain it by, oh, there is somebody who is different, who brings something different, who is interesting, who brings a change in our routine. But this made this wonderful attitude of hospitality. In Africa, really, I have experienced in the most beautiful way, hospitality. And I contribute this to the fact that it was in an area, it was not in a city. It was in a remote area.
It really encompasses Matthew 25, doesn't it?
Yes. This is where it goes back to. So what Benedict kind of quotes Matthew, anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. So Jesus himself announces his coming in this sentence. Think about, if you welcome a guest, it is like welcoming Christ, the one you are longing for, the one who has saved your life, or the one who wants to save your life. You know, sometimes I really think it very practically here in our monastery. So when I encounter a guest, or when guests are coming, I'm thinking, what if Christ is coming? So to take it real, to take it for real. Or in other words, how can this person who is now my guest and our guest contribute to my well-being, to my joy, to my love, to my spiritual life? There is a meaning that God has sent me this respective person and sent us this respective person at that time. And sometimes guests share with us that they exactly felt this attitude of hospitality. And because the monks are not able to leave the monastery because of the vow of stability, it is so precious to have guests. You know, when you easily can go out and in, then guests are maybe even more disturbing. But if you are kind of nailed to this place, everybody who comes brings the whole world, brings the world. Again, as we have television and internet, you can have your guests on the screen, so to speak. But still, the real encounter, the real contact, there is somebody coming to our place, and he is coming to seek a good encounter, finally to seek God. And sometimes this wonderful encounter happens like between Mary and Elizabeth, because if both are seeking God in the other person and finding the sacred, the divine in the other person, this is an incredible dynamic.
Father Mauritius, it can be a joy when it's someone we expect. It can be a challenge when it's someone we don't expect, that one who may have the need. And that is where the charism of hospitality really kicks in, isn't it? Because it's depending on God's grace to be able to meet the need of that person at the door.
That is very true. And Saint Benedict knows about this. And he says, the kitchen for the abbot and guests ought to be separate, so that guests and monasteries are never without them, need not disturb the brothers when they present themselves at unpredictable hours. So you can hear a little different tone. Sometimes having guests can be a burden too. St. Benedict knows that. But in a way, he helps us to deal properly with the guests. You have to find the right distance and closeness, the right balance. And one buffer, so to speak, is prayer. We have heard about this in the chapter before, how often he recommends pray first, and then go and pray, and then finally share the Holy Scriptures with the guests. So it's all centered around prayer. It's not so much about finding friends. Mm-hmm. It's about the friendship with Jesus. And so this would be one means to be able easily to carry this burden of having guests all the time, is to expose ourselves to prayer and the guests as well. I remember that I practiced this, or started to practice this. This is so funny. I'm not sure if this I have shared already in another interview, but anyway, you can cut it out if I have shared it.
Maybe not. Might be good to hear again.
Sometimes I find sentences in the rule and I just take them literally and try to live them. And not only the meaning, also just to live it literally. And once I took the sentence from this chapter on hospitality, pray first with the guests before you converse with them. And it was actually a couple that I was supposed to marry and to officiate their marriage. And it was the first encounter. And something told me, you should first pray. And so I took them to our church and we prayed together. And that created an incredible atmosphere that opened their hearts, that opened my heart. And from then on, the whole situation had changed. So again, you mentioned the burden that can be, or the challenge that can be involved with hospitality. Something that makes this easier is the prayer, because when the Holy Spirit comes in, things are not only bearable, things become joyful and delightful.
When I think of, too, the word hospice, and that Latin for the healing love, you can see the fruits of that in just the fact that we would have hospitals, the hospital, that being open for those who have illnesses. And the Benedictines were the ones, in a very real way, who continued that outreach during even 1,500 years ago, establishing that hospital, being open even to those who are severely sick.
Mm-hmm. This is true. You know, when you are traveling and when you are a stranger, and we are almost everywhere a stranger except at home, then we are vulnerable. Because when I'm not at home, I'm exposed to whatever comes. So the guest is per se vulnerable, needs per se healing closeness, needs affirmation and a good word and a good gesture. So yes, this is why Benedict mentions in this chapter the pilgrims and the poor in the same line with the guests. Because guests are dependent. Their well-being depends on my welcoming attitude. And you're right. I think that the rule of Saint Benedict shaped this value of hospitality over the centuries in our world. I guess in the natural way it was there before. You can find it very strongly in the Middle East, as I said, because you in a way also relied on guests and visitors who were coming. So there's a kind of natural inclination towards being open towards guests. But Saint Benedict has this spiritual connotation given to it, as you said, from Matthew, that we welcome Christ. I could also go back to the letter to the Hebrews. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. So this is the same. To look for the angel, to look for Christ in the guests. And the way how Benedict wants us to treat the guests comes very close to the way how we are to be with Christ. When he says, we should bow the head when we see the guests. You know, bowing the head is a gesture that is due to God, to Christ. Or when he says, even by complete prostration of the body, normally we prostrate only towards the divine, towards God. So he really takes it serious. There is Christ coming. Certainly there's a human being coming. So probably this guest will have good sides and dark sides. But by appealing to the image of God in the other, in the neighbor, in the guest. By seeking Christ in the guest, you kind of provoke him. You make him come out, make him be visible to you. And this is what guests sometimes in monasteries experience, that they found themselves all of a sudden, they found their good parts. Somebody appreciates them, somebody respects them. And this is because we try to see Christ in the other, in the guest. And even that the abbot should interrupt his fasting, that's an interesting part. It also goes back to the gospel when we hear, can the disciples fast as long as the bridegroom is present and around? So when Christ is there, there's no reason to fast. So this is why the abbot should interrupt his fasting, even the Lenten season. It's also a sign of the guest is now more important than all other spiritual exercises and commitments and whatever. Because when Christ is coming, this is the ultimate goal. He is coming. But again, maybe to bring it down a little bit, because it's now very holy, sounds at least to myself very holy. There is this wonderful saying of Benjamin Franklin: guests, like fish, begin to smell after 3 days. Actually, there's even a rule in our constitutions that a guest is not allowed to stay longer than a certain time. If he wants to stay longer, then it needs formal decision of the senior council. We need to find the right closeness and distance to a guest. And we also have to protect, in a way, to protect ourselves from the guests. And for this, I would like to read to you another passage of the rule. So Saint Benedict gives advice how to set up the kitchen for the guests. He says, each year 2 brothers who can do the work competently are to be assigned to this kitchen. Additional help should be available when needed, so that they can perform this service without grumbling. On the other hand, when the work slackens, they are to go wherever other duties are assigned them. This consideration is not for them alone, but applies to all duties in the monastery. The brothers are to be given help when it is needed, and whenever they are free, they work wherever they are assigned. The guest quarters are to be entrusted to a God-fearing brother. Adequate bedding should be available there. The house of God should be in the care of wise men who will manage it wisely. No one is to speak or associate with guests unless he is bidden. However, if a brother meets or sees a guest, he is to greet him humbly, as we have said. He asks for a blessing and continues on his way, explaining that he is not allowed to speak with the guest. This is an interesting passage in many ways. Let's start from the end. So you may wonder why he's not allowed to speak with the guests. We know that Benedict is very, really likes silence and not to make too many words. So this is part of it, that the monks don't break the silence, but they can encounter the guest and they ask them for a blessing again, because Christ is passing by, or is coming. Christ is coming, so the monk should ask the guest for a blessing. But the main reason why I read this passage for you is to show that Benedict knows about confreres who are overworked with the care for the guests. This is so important here. The problem with guests is you cannot always determine when they are coming. Sometimes many are coming, sometimes very few are coming, but this is challenging for those who are in charge of the guest rooms and of hospitality. And so Saint Benedict wants that the peace of the monks is not in danger. And if you need help, you can ask for help and you will get help in this area. And this is important for me to share with you because certainly we don't find hospitality not only in monasteries, because it's a wonderful value that many people practice. Let me only take one example. When relatives take care of their relatives, for example, when a daughter or a son takes care of her old father or mother, what is this other than hospitality? They are hospitable to their relatives. And as you know, this can be and can become burdensome, sometimes very burdensome. And all those who live this hospitality do it because they love their relatives or love their friends, but also because they love God. They see it as a reverence towards God. I assume it's the very same motive like monks welcome the guests. They feel this will be a blessing for me when I care for my father, for my mother. On the other hand, it is a fact that many are overwhelmed with this care, maybe over time. And we can learn from Saint Benedict, who balances everything in such a beautiful way that here too he encourages us to be honest to ourselves and to know about our limits and to ask for help if we cannot fulfill this task anymore, or at least cannot do it alone and need somebody else to help us.
Yeah, and recalling a burden shared is a burden lightened.
Right.
Also, Father Mauritius, for those out there who, in listening to you, part of the new evangelization is to help those who have experienced in their baptism to renew potentially things that maybe we knew, but we forgot, we didn't know we knew it. That when we speak of bowing or even prostrating ourselves before another because it's another Christ, that is at the very, very heart of our baptism. It's at the heart of who we are as Christians. We understand because of that baptism that it is not, what is it, Paul's Galatians 2:20, and jumping into it, but it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So that when someone like a Mother Teresa that would see a man dying on the streets of Calcutta, she would see Christ. She stopped everything to minister, not in a dramatic replay, but she literally felt she was encountering Christ in the other.
Yes, this is really at the heart of being a Christian. We all are called to become like Christ. And if we take this serious, this is what Saint Benedict recommends. And for Saint Benedict, this is a general motive. He looks for Christ in the guest, in the poor, in the pilgrim, but also in the sick, in the elderly, in all who are in need, especially. The needy are in his focus, but you can say this is true for everybody. Christ in the brother. We call it to seek Christ in the brother, in your sister. And you mentioned a new evangelization, and I'm thankful for this word because hospitality is really an important means of evangelizing. If I am not open for the fact that Christ wants to encounter me in the others, even in those who haven't joined the church yet, how can we ever reach out to them? So hospitality is at the core of every missionary work and the work of evangelization. Or in other words, I remember very well one of the very first statements of Pope Francis when he said that one of our dangers nowadays is that we are too self-referential in the church, that we circle around ourselves, that we only see ourselves. This is the opposite of hospitality. Hospitality means to look up and to wonder if Christ does not want to come to me in a guest, in another person. So this kind of openness, I'm not talking about a general openness to be open for everybody and everything. This is not the point. It is to be open for Christ. And it is not up to me to decide when Christ is coming, where he is coming, and through whom he is coming. Everybody has the potential to be the Christ for me. And this is a wonderful thing. This is not a burden. This is, this is a joy. He can come at any time through any person. So this value of hospitality is necessary for all of those who are seriously who want to evangelize and to be missionaries nowadays.
I'm so glad that you emphasized that last point, because Christ, in teaching in that parable of the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan wasn't a member of the group. Mm-hmm. Jonah didn't want to go to the Ninevites because they weren't a part of the group, and he didn't want to go there. And yet, that's it. At its heart is that even for the Christian to welcome the stranger, to be present and to see Christ, even in the person who may not be the Christian. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't seem to me so that there was a teaching somewhere that said only welcome the Christian, only welcome the one, a fellow member of the group. And that can be, boy, that's really pushing mm-hmm. people's comfort levels, mm-hmm. isn't it?
And again, trust the Christ-evoking strength you have as a Christian. So what happens when I encounter somebody who is outside my group, who is not a Christian yet, or maybe not a Catholic yet, or whatever? What happens? Cor ad cor loquitur. Heart speaks to the heart. Christ speaks to Christ. So even if the other still is not aware of the fact that he carries Christ, Christ is already talking in a way to himself. So when we offer this openness, the only thing we do is to enable Christ to find himself in the other. So in this way of openness and hospitality, you kind of evoke Christ, which is a wonderful thing.
There is an element, I suppose we should address as well, that can prevent us from doing that, and that's the element of fear. Mm-hmm. I remember those Benedictine women who on that day long ago in the 1200s heard a banging on their door, and St. Francis was bringing a young girl who would become St. Clare to their door for protection. They didn't hesitate to open that door. And they had to stand against some pretty strong violence coming towards them in an attempt to protect her. And yet they did that. It would have been so easy. I mean, imagine stories like that over and over again, that continued witness. Look at the fruit from that action.
Actually, nothing against this fear. As I said in the beginning, a good portion of fear is good because you don't know if the person really wants to bring good only, or if this is an enemy. But our task, our challenge as Christians would be to transform the fear into reverence. Because reverence still has this element of fear and of a good distance, to keep a good distance, but at the same time, we prepare ourselves with the Holy Spirit. So as we are reverent towards the guest, That does not mean that we are naive or that we are just not prepared to whoever is coming. So we are still awake. But we have this most important door opened in our heart that helps to let Christ come in. And if Christ is with us, we are not to be afraid. There's no need to be afraid because He is with us. How could we be afraid?
I suppose that the key in that discernment would be each moment in the rule, in this particular addressing of hospitality, St. Benedict is imploring us to pray before each check it out first.
Good.
At almost every single encounter.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's true.
Any final thoughts, Father Mauritius?
Yeah, maybe a last thought. When we look at Jesus, He loved to be a guest. Remember when He visited with Mary and Martha, when He wanted to be invited by Zacchaeus, and so He actually loved to be a guest. So this is why we shouldn't wonder that He's really coming someday, because it's one of His favorite things to be invited. But we could also turn the things around and see Jesus not only as the guest, but also as the host. Think about the Eucharist, the Holy Eucharist. We could see Jesus as our host. He invites us to be His guests. He welcomes us, no matter how poor we are, how strange we are, to what group we belong to, how prepared we are, how focused we are, how spiritual we are. He welcomes us, He prays with us, and He washes our feet, and He serves us and serves our needs. This is what He does in the Holy Eucharist.
Thank you so much, Father Mauritius.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to The Holy Rule of St. Benedict with Father Mauritius Wilde. To hear and/or to download this conversation, along with hundreds of other spiritual formation programs, visit discerninghearts.com, or you can find it within the free Discerning Hearts app or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. This has been a production of Discerning Hearts. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. We hope that if this program has been helpful for you, that you will first pray for our mission, which is to offer authentic and rock-solid spiritual formation freely to souls around the world. And if you feel us worthy, please consider a charitable donation, which is fully tax-deductible, to help support our efforts. But most of all, we hope that you will tell a friend about discerninghearts.com and join us next time for The Holy Rule of St. Benedict with Father Mauritius Wilde.